Hi, I'm Christina, and I'm going to be talking about my philosophy of education. When I think about what philosophy I most identify with, it's constructionism and cognitivism. I believe it's essential that students build ideas based off prior knowledge and previous experience. Cognitive theory emphasizes making knowledge meaningful and helping learners organize and relate new info to existing knowledge. I'm a huge proponent of this concept of scaffolding, which goes along with the cognitivism idea, because I want my students to take their previous experiences and connect it to what we are learning. I want my students to interact with their peers through engagement and discussion in order to kind of build off each other and learn new ideas and concepts about history. For me, the purpose of education is to help students as an individual and also to help them grow as a larger part of society. It's also the purpose is also to help students obtain new knowledge. More specifically, when I think about history, I want students to understand why history is significant and why it is important that we learn about it. Um, if I think about how I'm going to reach my students in my diverse classroom, I plan to appeal to my diverse classroom by allowing them to express themselves and express their personal experiences and how those relate to what we are discussing in class. I also plan to incorporate historically relevant content through the school year that is representative of all the different students in my classrooms. So essentially, I would like to, include different viewpoints that relate to their different diverse backgrounds. When I think about bringing global awareness into my classroom, I related that to the Noddings chapter. So basically, I could raise global awareness in my classroom by teaching multiculturalism to my students through the use of culture-centered framework. And again, as I had just mentioned, I think that history is a great area to do this because you have the ability to represent the material from multiple viewpoints, and you can find these different viewpoints that involve your students' culture, and you can kind of tie that in to your lessons. As far as my teaching methodologies, I believe in encouraging critical thinking and class-led discussions. I also plan to use interactive technology and gamification to promote student learning and understandings. Students will also use critical thinking skills in my classroom to develop new understandings about historical concepts. So for me, when I think about like gamification in the classroom, one thing I really like to do with history is role playing. I think it gives the students an opportunity to really experience history in a different way. And it sort of provides them with this opportunity to care about history because, typically history role playing games, students have these objectives and agenda that they must achieve. So it kind of becomes competitive because they want to play out these characters the way they're supposed to. And I think it's a really good way to get them like actively involved with their education and learning about history, and it makes it more exciting and engaging for them. So I plan to use a lot of techniques like that to get my students involved. Um, as far as the role as the teacher, I basically identified with Nicholson's idea about the teacher as a questioner. So I want to do a lot of class-led discussions. I feel like in my own experiences that really helped me learn. So essentially, I will lead discussions that ask students the important questions, and it makes them examine and challenge opinions. They develop argument skills, and they refine their critical thinking this way, and they're able to support their arguments and their answers to these questions by using the evidence that they've gotten from the text or the readings that we've been doing. So I feel like it's a good way to sort of like get the classroom actively involved and participating, and then they sort of like are able to bounce off one another's ideas. So I think it's a really great way for them to sort of grow. And again, in my own experience, that was one of the best ways that I learned about history was, having these group class discussions, because it allows you to see different opinions and multiple viewpoints, and I think that's a great way to start. As far as the role of the student, again, I aligned with Nicholson's idea that the student is a discussant. So I expect my students to actively engage in class discussions and also to provide evidence to support their argument, like I was just saying. So, they have to have something to back it up. And I think that's great because it allows you to sort of assess them to see if they're reading, if they're understanding, but it's not in a formal way. So therefore, we're all just discussing, but while doing so, I'm able to gauge what my students understand, what they're not understanding, and I can build off of that. As far as my belief on how students learn, I guess I would believe that students learn best when they're allowed to express themselves freely, and I feel that they can do that in the classroom. Students learn best when they're able to actively engage in their learning and sort of feel like their ideas matter. So again, going back to the games and the discussions, like I personally feel that it allows them to be actively engaged in their learning. And when they have that option to express themselves, like it gives them that confidence they need because to them they feel like, okay, I have a voice and my opinion does matter. As far as my goal for my students, I really want my students to feel like history is exciting again. I want them to I want to help them understand why history, what the purpose is, like why do they need to learn about it? And I want to do this in a meaningful way. So, I want to move away from that lecture textbook experience that so many history students complain about today. Like most teachers use the whole, oh, well, read your textbook and I'll lecture you in class. And I want to get away from that. Like, I want my students to sort of like immerse themselves in the history and have the ability to research and, be a part of it, not just, oh, read your textbook. There's a way to make it more exciting for them, and I feel like that's my goal. As far as the most effective learning environment, I feel like it's one where students feel like they matter, like I had said, like their voice matters, their opinion matters, what they have to say can contribute to the class as a whole. And I also feel like it's important that they feel safe and comfortable in the class and they're able to express themselves. I identify with Maslow here because I believe in the hierarchy of needs. And more importantly, in my educational philosophy, I talked about creating a safe environment in my classroom. Because if I expect my students to be able to feel like they can share and reach their full potential, then they need to feel comfortable doing so. So meeting those basic minimum requirements first is really important. I also believe that the most effective learning environment relates to Vygotsky's theory that the child plays an active role in the relationship with their environment by interacting and modifying it to help learning capability. So I want my students to have a classroom environment that's suitable for their own personal learning style so they can achieve at their highest level. So I think when I do lessons and we teach things, etc., that it's important to incorporate multiple learning styles in order to make sure that everybody's needs are being met. Because if they're able to interact more closely and build this better relationship with the way they're learning things, I feel like they'll achieve at a higher level. When I think about how my views on teaching and education have been changed throughout this course, I honestly feel like my teaching has been significantly strengthened because I now know which philosophies I would like to implement in my classroom, and I'm also able to identify how those philosophies would work in my classroom and how I would like to use them. So I feel like this is important because I now have a better understanding of the teacher that I want to be and how I want my students to learn. Given all the philosophies that we've talked about and everything, I feel like, again, that the cognitivism, constructivism model would work really well with what I want to do. So just knowing the basics and being able to sort of delve into that a little bit deeper and understanding where the connection is between how I teach and knowing that, there is a philosophy to go along with that, I think that's beneficial. So when I consider my own educational experiences, I guess I can see now that I've had many different teachers who use so many different philosophies. So it's all over the place. Like, and it's not a bad thing. I think it's interesting to see that everyone has a different teaching style and everyone uses a different teaching philosophy. And I think that's kind of been important because it's allowed me to sort of see the positives and the negatives of each different philosophy. Now that I have a better understanding of, how those teaching styles are represented by the philosophies, again, it helps me really determine how I want to teach and what philosophy that I want to use in my classroom. So that's all about my educational philosophy, and thanks for listening.